She was the sister of the famous Fuso. But the battleship Yamashiro met an even more brutal end. This is the story of her final, hellish battle in the dark waters of Surigao Strait. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into the history of a battleship often overshadowed by her sister, yet whose final hours represent one of the most dramatic and terrifying moments in naval warfare. We're talking about the Imperial Japanese Navy battleship Yamashiro, the second ship of the Fuso-class, a vessel destined to lead a forlorn hope into the jaws of death during the largest naval battle in history. Her story is one of impressive engineering, long years of service, and ultimately a fiery sacrifice against impossible odds. Let's uncover the tale of the Yamashiro, Fuso's ill-fated sister. The tale begins in the early 20th century, a time of intense naval rivalry. Japan, having recently stunned the world by defeating Russia in 1905, was determined to maintain a powerful fleet capable of challenging the Western powers. The Fuso-class battleships were conceived in this environment, intended to be Japan's first true super dreadnoughts, heavily armed and armored vessels designed to dominate the seas. Yamashiro was laid down at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal on November 20th, 1913, just over a year after her elder sister Fuso. Launched almost 2 years later in November 1915, she was formally commissioned into the Imperial Japanese Navy on March 31st, 1917. Together, Fuso and Yamashiro were formidable warships for their time. Yamashiro displaced just under 30,000 long tons standard and stretched over 670 feet in length. Her main armament was truly fearsome. 12 14-inch guns mounted in 6 twin turrets. This arrangement, however, was somewhat awkward. 2 turrets were placed forward, 2 aft, and 2 were positioned amidships, separated by the ship's machinery spaces and funnels. This layout, while packing a heavy punch, complicated fire control and created weaknesses in the deck armor around the midships turrets. It also meant that a full broadside used only a portion of the ship's main battery potential, effectively due to blast interference and firing arcs. Secondary armament initially consisted of 16 6-inch guns mounted in casemates along the hull, designed to fend off smaller attackers like destroyers and torpedo boats. Anti-aircraft defense, initially an afterthought in 1917, was meager, consisting of just a few 3-inch guns. Her armor belt was impressive, reaching a maximum thickness of 12 inches along the waterline, designed to withstand the heavy shells of contemporary battleships. Power came from steam turbines driving 4 propellers, giving Yamashiro a respectable top speed of around 23 knots when she was first commissioned. One of the most striking features of both Yamashiro and Fuso, particularly after their later reconstructions, was the incredibly tall, complex forward superstructure known as the pagoda mast. This structure evolved over time as more and more platforms, searchlights, rangefinders, and command facilities were added higher and higher, seeking better visibility and command positions. While visually imposing and iconic, these towering structures added significant top weight, raising concerns about stability, and presented a massive target profile. Yamashiro's pagoda mast, after her major refits, differed slightly in detail from Fuso's, a point often noted by naval enthusiasts comparing the sisters. Between the 2 world wars, Yamashiro, like most capital ships of the era, underwent significant modernization efforts. Japan was constrained by naval treaties like the Washington Naval Treaty, which limited new battleship construction, forcing navies to invest heavily in upgrading their existing fleets. Yamashiro received her major reconstruction between 1930 and 1935. This extensive refit dramatically altered her appearance and capabilities. Her hull was lengthened by about 25 feet, primarily to improve her underwater hull form and speed. Her boilers were replaced with newer, more efficient oil-fired models, significantly increasing her fuel capacity and operational range. Her 2 funnels were trunked into a single, larger stack. The elevation of her main 14-inch guns was increased, extending their range. Her horizontal deck armor was substantially thickened over the machinery and magazine spaces to improve protection against plunging shells and aerial bombs. a growing threat recognized by naval architects worldwide. Her torpedo bulges were enlarged, enhancing underwater protection, and incidentally, helping to counteract the added top weight from the rebuilt superstructure. Her secondary armament saw changes too, with some of the lower casemate guns being removed. Critically, her anti-aircraft suite was significantly upgraded, reflecting the increasing danger posed by naval aviation. Multiple twin 25mm automatic cannons, Japan's standard light anti-aircraft weapon, were installed, along with heavier 5-inch dual-purpose guns capable of engaging both surface and air targets. Despite these upgrades, her anti-aircraft firepower, like that of many Japanese warships, would ultimately prove inadequate against the massed air attacks characteristic of World War II in the Pacific. The pagoda mast reached its final, dizzying height during this period, crammed with fire control directors and observation posts. While Fuso often served as the flagship for various fleet commanders in the interwar years, Yamashiro had a relatively quieter, though still active, career. She participated in numerous fleet exercises, training maneuvers, and patrols, honing the skills of her crew and testing the effectiveness of her systems. She served as a flagship on occasion and represented Japan during naval reviews. Unlike some battleships that saw action in the Second Sino-Japanese War, Yamashiro's pre-World War II service was largely peaceful, a period of preparation for a conflict that seemed increasingly inevitable. Life aboard was a mix of rigorous drills, maintenance, and the routines of naval life, punctuated by periods in port for refitting and replenishment. She was a powerful symbol of Imperial Japanese naval might, even if newer, faster battleships were beginning to enter service. When war finally erupted in the Pacific in December 1941, Yamashiro and her sister Fuso were considered older, slower battleships compared to the newer Nagato and Yamato classes. Their relatively low speed, around 24.5 knots even after modernization, made them unsuitable for operating alongside the fast carrier strike forces that dominated the early stages of the conflict. Consequently, Yamashiro was initially relegated to homeland defense duties and training roles within the Japanese Combined Fleet's Battleship Division II. She did participate in the sortie towards Midway in June 1942 as part of the Aleutian Guard Force under Vice Admiral Shiro Takasu, a diversionary operation intended to draw American forces north while the main attack fell on Midway Atoll. This force, however, saw no combat, and the Midway operation ended in disaster for Japan's carrier fleet. For much of 1942 and 1943, Yamashiro remained in Japanese home waters or acted as a training ship, occasionally ferrying troops or supplies, but largely staying out of the major fleet actions in the South Pacific. It was a frustrating period for her crew, watching the tide of war slowly turn against Japan while their powerful battleship remained on the sidelines. There were further minor upgrades, mostly additions to her light anti-aircraft armament, but her fundamental limitations remained. She was a ship built for a previous era of naval warfare. By late 1944, Japan was in a desperate situation. American forces island-hopping across the Pacific were poised to invade the Philippines, severing Japan's vital supply lines from Southeast Asia. The Imperial Japanese Navy, heavily depleted after years of attritional warfare, particularly the disastrous Battle of the Philippine Sea, concocted a complex and highly risky plan called Sho-Go 1, or Operation Victory 1. The objective was to lure the main American carrier forces away with a decoy fleet of carriers lacking aircraft, while powerful surface forces would converge on the American landing beaches at Lake Gulf from the north and south, hoping to annihilate the invasion fleet in a decisive surface engagement. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. Yamashiro was assigned to the Southern Force, designated Force C, under the command of Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura. This force was tasked with penetrating Leyte Gulf from the south via the Surigao Strait. Yamashiro served as Nishimura's flagship, leading a modest contingent consisting of her sister Fuso, the heavy cruiser Mogami, and 4 destroyers, Michishio, Asagumo, Yamagumo, and Shigure. Nishimura was known as a determined, perhaps even stubborn, commander. His force was significantly weaker than the other main Japanese surface attack group, Vice Admiral Kurida's center force, which was supposed to enter Leyte Gulf from the north through the San Bernardino Strait. Critically, Nishimura's force lacked air cover and possessed outdated radar technology compared to their American adversaries. The plan required precise timing and coordination between the different Japanese forces, something the Imperial Navy struggled with throughout the war, due to poor communication security and overly complex operational designs. Nishimura was ordered to transit Surigao Strait during the night of October 24th to 25th and arrive off the Leyte landing beaches at dawn, coordinating his attack with Kurita's center force arriving from the north. However, communication breakdowns and adherence to radio silence meant Nishimura had little idea of Kurita's progress or the status of the other Japanese forces. He pushed onward according to the original timetable, steaming towards destiny. The journey towards Surigao Strait was already fraught with peril. American submarines and aircraft were active in the area. On the approach, Nishimura's force was spotted, and the element of surprise was lost. Furthermore, Fuso suffered damage from an American air attack earlier on October 24th, though she pressed on. As Nishimura's ships entered the narrow confines of Surigao Strait in the late hours of October 24th, they were sailing into a meticulously prepared trap. Waiting for them was the U.S. 7th Fleet Support Force under the command of Rear Admiral Jesse B. Oldendorf. Oldendorf, a seasoned naval officer, had deployed his forces brilliantly to take maximum advantage of the narrow strait. He had a powerful contingent of 6 older battleships, including 5 resurrected veterans of the Pearl Harbor attack: West Virginia, Maryland, Tennessee, California, and Pennsylvania, plus the Mississippi. These battleships were arranged in a battle line across the northern exit of the strait. Ahead of them were 8 cruisers forming flanking lines, and screening further south were no fewer than 28 destroyers organized into squadrons, poised to deliver devastating torpedo attacks. Adding to the danger were numerous PT boats patrolling the lower reaches of the strait, ready to harry the advancing Japanese. Nishimura pressed forward into the darkness, Yamashiro leading the column. Just before midnight, the first encounters occurred as American PT boats launched harassing torpedo attacks. While these small, fast boats scored no hits on the major warships, their reports confirmed the Japanese approach and kept Nishimura's crews on high alert, firing star shells that perfectly illuminated the Japanese ships for the waiting American destroyers. Around 3 o'clock in the morning on October 25th, the real nightmare began. U.S. destroyer squadrons, skillfully maneuvering in the darkness, launched coordinated torpedo attacks from both sides of the Japanese column. The results were catastrophic for Nishimura's force. Torpedoes slammed into the battleship Fuso, Yamashiro's sister. Fuso suffered massive damage, potentially breaking in two, and exploded in a tremendous fireball, sinking rapidly with very few survivors. She was gone before Yamashiro even reached the main American battle line. Multiple destroyers in Nishimura's screen were also hit. Yamagumo exploded, Asagumo had her bow blown off but struggled on for a time, and Michishio was crippled, later finished off by more torpedoes. Only the destroyer Shigure, miraculously, escaped major damage in this phase, eventually managing to reverse course and flee the strait. Aboard Yamashiro, Nishimura received fragmented reports of the chaos around him. Despite the mauling his force was receiving, he seemed grimly determined to push onward towards the objective. Then, torpedoes found Yamashiro herself. At least 1, possibly 2, American torpedoes struck the battleship around 3:10 a.m. While her torpedo bulges likely absorbed some of the impact, the damage caused flooding and slowed her down. Still, she maintained course and speed as best she could, her remaining 14-inch guns firing sporadically at unseen targets identified by searchlights or gun flashes. Now, Yamashiro, battered but defiant, steamed directly into the crosshairs of Oldendorf's main force. The American cruisers opened fire first, unleashing a torrent of 6-inch and 8-inch shells using radar-directed fire control. Yamashiro was illuminated by searchlights and star shells, a perfect target silhouetted against the night. Shells rained down on her pagoda mast and upper works, starting massive fires. Then, at 3:53 a.m., Oldendorf gave the order for his battleships to open fire. The American battle line executed the classic naval maneuver known as crossing the T. This positioned the American ships so they could bring all their main batteries to bear on the approaching enemy column, which could only reply with its forwardmost guns. For the Pearl Harbor veterans, it was a moment of grim satisfaction. West Virginia, equipped with the latest radar fire control, landed hits with her first salvo of 16-inch shells. Maryland, using older radar, fired by spotting West Virginia's shell splashes. California and Tennessee, also radar-equipped, poured heavy shells into the stricken Japanese flagship. Pennsylvania had trouble finding a target, and Mississippi fired only one salvo at the very end of the engagement. The effect on Yamashiro was overwhelming. 16-inch and 14-inch armor-piercing shells smashed into her hull and superstructure. Her pagoda mast, already ablaze, became an inferno. Secondary battery magazines may have detonated, contributing to the destruction. Communication systems were knocked out, command and control disintegrated. Fires raged uncontrollably, fed by fuel lines and ammunition. Despite the horrific punishment, reports suggest Yamashiro's remaining guns continued to fire defiantly for a time, a testament to the discipline, or perhaps desperation, of her gun crews. She even managed to turn briefly, perhaps attempting to bring more guns to bear or to retreat, but the damage was too severe. She was hit by hundreds of shells from the American cruisers and battleships in a matter of minutes. Listing heavily, burning from stem to stern, her speed bled away. Around 4:19 a.m. on October 25, 1944, less than an hour after the first torpedo hits, the battleship Yamashiro capsized and sank rapidly by the stern, taking Vice Admiral Nishimura and the vast majority of her estimated 1,639 crew members with her. Only a handful of men, perhaps as few as 10, survived the sinking and the subsequent ordeal in the water. Her sister ship Fuso was already gone, and the heavy cruiser Mogami, also heavily damaged, managed to limp away only to be sunk by aircraft later that day. Nishimura's southern force had ceased to exist. The Battle of Surigao Strait was the last time in history that battleships engaged battleships in combat. It was a devastatingly one-sided victory for the United States Navy, executed with textbook precision by Admiral Oldendorf. For Japan, it was another catastrophic loss in the broader disaster of the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Yamashiro's final charge, while courageous in its own way, was ultimately a futile sacrifice, ordered into a situation where destruction was almost guaranteed. Yamashiro rests today in the deep, dark waters of Surigao Strait, a war grave holding nearly all who served aboard her during that final battle. Her wreck, along with Fuso and other ships lost in the engagement, serves as a somber reminder of the brutal realities of naval warfare in World War II. She remains overshadowed by her sister Fuso in some historical accounts, perhaps because Fuso was the lead ship of the class, or because Yamashiro's end came amidst the chaos that also claimed Fuso shortly before. But Yamashiro's story deserves to be told. The story of a powerful dreadnought, extensively rebuilt, only to find herself obsolete in the age of air power, yet called upon for one last desperate mission as a flagship leading her force into oblivion. So what ultimately sealed Yamashiro's fate? Was it outdated design, flawed strategy, poor communication, Nishimura's determination, or simply the overwhelming and expertly deployed firepower of the US Navy? It was likely a combination of all these factors. She sailed into a perfectly laid trap, lacking the speed, radar, air cover, and sheer numbers needed to survive, let alone succeed. Her end, alongside her sister Fuso and the rest of Nishimura's command, marked a definitive moment in the decline of the Imperial Japanese Navy and the end of the battleship era. What do you think about the Yamashiro's final mission? Was it a necessary sacrifice under desperate circumstances, or a senseless waste of ships and lives based on a flawed plan? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. These discussions really help bring history alive. And if you enjoy exploring these deep dives into military history, the machines, the battles, and the legends, consider hitting that subscribe button. We're always uncovering more stories like the tragic tale of the Yamashiro, Fuso's doomed sister, right here. Thanks for watching.